Subscribe to GovExec Plus on YouTube and stay informed on the latest in public sector news, insights, and thought leadership. Scan the QR code now or search for GovExec Plus on YouTube.
Hello, and welcome to Securing the Edge, Contested Logistics and Supply Chain Resilience in the Indo-Pacific. I'm your host, Jennifer Ladd with Defense One. As the United States and its allies work together for operations across the Indo-Pacific, logistics has emerged as both a decisive advantage and a potential point of failure. Vast distances, dispersed forces, and increasingly contested domains are placing extraordinary strain on supply chains. The challenge is no longer just about moving material. It's about anticipating disruption, protecting vulnerable networks from cyber and physical threats, and ensuring forces remain equipped and ready on the battlefield and beyond. So how are defense leaders rethinking sustainment for this region? Let's find out. We're joined today by Colonel Todd Burroughs. He's the Deputy Commanding Officer for Support for 7th Infantry Division Multi-Domain Command Pacific, and Joe McMahon, the Senior Director of Defense Mission Software for GDIT. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's talk about logistics. So when we talk about logistics, what is different about the Indo-Pacific theater compared to other regions, and what makes sustainment so important in this theater?
So I'll jump on that one. First of all, scope and scale, or we can call it the tyranny of distance. The Pacific is simply huge. When you take that and you combine it with a threat whose focus is anti-access and area denial and is able to hold at risk through multiple domains, our operational and strategic logistics, that's really what makes it different. It's kind of like the evolutionary character of war. And that's really what we're looking at when we're looking at contested logistics in the Indo-Pacific.
Okay. Colonel Burroughs, also from your perspective, why is sustaining forces at the tactical edge so critical in today's competitive environment?
Well, we kind of just talked about it. First of all, when the lines of communication are so long and spread over that tyranny of distance, it's really hard, even if you don't take anything else into account. When you have a threat who is able to hold at risk operational and strategic logistics and can disrupt, then that makes it even more difficult. Then as the land power component of the joint force, we have this imperative to operate dispersed and non-contiguous battle spaces. So it becomes really a problem of distribution of logistics as well as supply. That's why we really have to focus on it and look at conducting sustainment on the tactical edge so that we can plan for that disruption and be able to endure it.
Well, so looking at recent operations or exercises, what moments have changed the way you think about logistics resilience and how you approach contested logistics?
I think the more appropriate question might be which ones haven't.
Okay, fair.
Throughout a pretty long career, I've learned something from every single operation, every single exercise. I had a mentor who once said, battalions and companies and platoons don't run out of water. Soldiers run out of water.
Right.
What that means is when you plan logistics, you have to plan from the strategic or the industrial strategic, all the way through the operational, all the way down to how long it takes a soldier to fill his canteen with water. That's just the analogy I use to talk about how important it is for that really, really detailed planning, which is difficult, especially when you take into account the threat. It vastly increases the cognitive load on everyone associated with it.
And before you even get into some of that, we participated in an exercise out in Guam called Mobility Guardian. In there, we demonstrated the ability to do at the edge collaboration, which is the foundation of a lot of that work.
Right.
So if these soldiers are out there and they can't even collaborate, you're not even getting to the intel or the ops functions. So we need to establish that first. And I think the advances that have come from doing these kind of exercises have just enabled us to accelerate that.
Okay. So disruption is inevitable. There's cyber threats, physical attacks, even just the difficulty of moving across the vast distances, severe weather. How do you stay ahead of all these challenges rather than just reacting to them once they happen?
I would throw a couple of things out there. Okay. One, multiple options. If you have disruption and you're trying to get supplies in, you have to have multiple routes to do it, multiple avenues, multiple suppliers, multiple of any different node of the sustainment infrastructure. That would be the first thing. That sometimes takes time. So then we start talking about sustainment at the edge. And how do we do that? It's much like what I'm sure Joe is going to talk about later, which, when you're talking about computing at the edge, we're talking about these self-contained systems that are able to operate independent of the greater ecosystem, that are able to sustain independently, whether they are a composition of supplies, distribution, compute power, to be able to remove some of that cognitive load of the planning, do it independently, and then when the architecture kind of corrects itself, adapts, is able to plug back in, synchronize and coordinate, and then continue operating as it's supposed to.
Colonel Burroughs had it right there at the end, right? In previous engagements that we've had over the last couple of decades, we've enjoyed the ability to rely on communications more so than in the Indo-Pacific region. So we, on the industry side, need to factor that in from the design forward. Like, we can't make those assumptions anymore that we will have unlimited bandwidth, or at least reasonable bandwidth out at the edge. There might be none. We're dealing with near-peer competitors who have the capability to deny, disrupt, and deter us. So we have to factor that in our designs and implementation so that the soldiers out in the field can do their job even if disruption occurs.
Okay. Colonel Burroughs, what does it mean in practice to build resilience into operational planning? Are there approaches or lessons that have proven particularly effective?
So I think what we're looking at now, building resilience in, we're talking about sustainment at the edge. We've kind of, that's the recurring theme here. And whether it's a technological system, whether it's prepositioned supplies, sometimes it may be the ability for additive manufacturing, manufacturing forward. The keynote speaker this morning, he talked about, industry having forward industrial capability.
Right.
That is all crucial because of the vast distances, the potential for disruption. And when we're talking about planning for resilience, I think that's what we're talking about planning for.
Yeah. Undersecretary Royal's point was exactly spot on, and I loved his term of the forward defense industrial base. Right? No longer, again, relying on it being from U.S. CONUS operations and then trying to get it out there. I think the other thing that we need to tee up is we need to treat logistics, or the FOR, as a co-partner in mission planning. In the Indo-Pacific region, logistics is like the operation.
Right.
And it will support all of the other functions there. But it can't be treated as not co-equal to the two or the three.
Okay. I would jump on top of that and say yes. So logistics, especially in the Indo-Pacific, either facilitates or constrains operational timing and tempo. Right. And if the FOR is not at least an equal partner, we know which way that's going to fall.
Right. That makes sense. Mr. McMahon, from an industry perspective, how are emerging technologies helping commanders improve visibility and decision-making across complex supply chains? I mean, you kind of already talked about that with manufacturing forward.
Correct. I really go to enabling data-driven decisions.
Okay.
So factoring in collecting the right data and presenting it to the commander in a timely fashion and in a way that they can consume it and act on it. So logistics, I think, has, again, because it hasn't really been that first-tier citizen in the units, we haven't put a lot of attention on how do you enable data-driven decisions in the FOR. There is some out there, but not to the degree that we apply to intel or operations. And doing that in a way that we apply predictive analytics, predictive maintenance, in order to make our fighting force that much more efficient and lethal.
How do you strike the right balance between short-term efficiency and building long-term resilience that can adapt to evolving threats and technologies?
So when I think of short-term efficiency, I just think about simple economics.
Right.
Try to get the right stuff to the right place at the right time, at the right echelon, at the lowest cost. When you build resilience into that, and we start talking about, sustainment at the edge, it may not be the most efficient. We may have to build, we may have to have prepositioned stocks, not just-in-time inventory. We may have to have alternate routes, alternate vendors, alternate suppliers. It may not be, the most efficient, but it may be the most resilient, able to withstand those disruptions.
Sure. Mr. McMahon, what are some technologies or capabilities that you see as game changers for sustaining forces that are spread throughout this enormous Indo-Pacific region?
Yeah, I can think of 3 to 4. So the first one being the innovation around space-based mesh networks. It gives a pervasive communication network to all over the globe, but in this region, very important. The second is the growth in autonomous systems. We've heard it here at the conference in droves, but being a force multiplier for our units across the board, whether it's to do intel, ops, or logistics, I think that's going to be a real game changer as far as technology. Finally, it goes without saying, the growth in AI ML is exceptional, and seeing what advances it can provide. We back up a year from now, and we're looking at AI that is light years different from what we have today with the agentic AI capabilities, what we can do in software development. And we, again, demonstrated that exercise I talked about earlier, where we were able to do live coding out at the edge on those compute devices with AI assistance. So that is a real game changer to enable a force out there in a DDoS environment to rapidly be able to adapt to the situation that they're finding faced when they have no communications back.
How can government and industry collaborate more effectively to ensure that if there is a conflict, we have the necessary interoperability and surge capacity already there?
I think we talked about it a little already. Instead of thinking about legacy systems where government or industry is back here rather, and then they're pushing everything forward, we're talking about additive manufacturing and manufacturing at the edge. The defense industrial base forward. That will help to close those distances. It will help us to operate in a dispersed environment a little bit better, and anything we can do to help manufacture forward just makes us more resilient, makes the sustainment system, the sustainment at the edge, more resilient as a system. Plus, as Joe was talking about, when we're looking at edge computing, edge nodes being more predictive, the more we can move forward together doing that, just the better off we're all going to be, because as we're operating more dispersed as a land component, which we have to do in this environment, the distribution becomes much more difficult. The spoke and wheel that we think about is now multiple spokes and wheels, and being able to determine who needs what, when they need it, where they need it, it increases cognitive load to a standpoint that it takes a team, where we could do it with technology. Technology could really help gain some of those efficiencies that we were talking about earlier.
I just came from a panel that touched on this exact question, and it was interesting to hear their perspective in how do we do that out at the edge, but with our multi-partner nation kind of coalitions out there. How do we look and source materials that are native out there that we might not have used in the original manufacturing? Right. And then what are we willing to accept from a construction and certification before they go into operations, if we have to go to that step and do additive manufacturing out at the edge? These are hard problems, but we're looking at them now, which is a good thing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so beyond technology, what cultural or organizational shifts are needed to make logistics more agile and adaptive in a contested environment?
So a couple of things come to mind. First, fieldcraft. And I know that sounds simple, but for the last 20 plus years, we've been operating off of fobs and drinking bottled water.
Right.
To be brutally honest.
Yes.
And in this new environment, in this new contested logistics, this new arena, we're going to have to be much more cognizant of how we do sustainment. How do we get water? Not necessarily bottled water. How do we manufacture water? And I know I talk a lot about water, but I'm an infantry guy, so water is really difficult to come by. How do we do additive manufacturing? That's critical. It's going to be very critical to train ourselves to try to bring industry, the government, the military for to do additive manufacturing and to be comfortable doing it. How do we use AI and be comfortable using AI? Because, you know, some of us are relatively old and AI is very new.
Right.
So how do we feel comfortable letting that augment the decision cycle to make us faster? And then how do we use our joint and combined partners? Because none of us can do this alone. It's not an Army thing.
Right.
For us, it's a complete joint thing. And then we can't do anything without our allies and partners across the globe.
Yeah, I'll add two more. So underlying Colonel Burroughs' first point is what we talked about at the beginning. You need to elevate before to be a co-partner there. That's everything about, you know, getting water to the right place at the right time. That's the operation now. So logistics is the operation in this theater. Second, we need to start adopting rigor around using open standards in everything. It's been a discussion point on the software side of things for sure, but again, I've heard at this conference already talk about how do we do it with regards to things that we manufacture, such that if I need multiple providers, that they're all building that part the same way so that they're interchangeable. Again, it comes down to open standards. It's the software equivalent of a programming interface, and we align against those with different manufacturers.
I want to dovetail over that. Right to repair is huge. That and consistent systems.
Right.
Instead of having, you know, 1,000 parts in your shop stock, you have 500. That's a considerable advance.
Right. Right. Instead of having everything has a bolt, but all of the bolts are different sizes, you know, maybe having the bolts be similar sizes kind of thing. Yes. And I was just going to say, to be fair, maybe not everybody worries about water, but water is very important to everyone. So I'm sure the soldiers do appreciate you worrying about it. As we look ahead to the future, what does the future of sustainment look like for operations in contested theaters like the Indo-Pacific?
I think Joe hit it on the head. You know, historically, everything has supported the maneuverist.
Right.
You know, I'm an infantryman. It kind of existed to get the infantrymen to the fight so the infantrymen can close with and destroy the enemy. We're doing some different things now. We're maneuvering to fire. We have to, I think, maneuver to sustain. And I think being comfortable with that and looking at that as a way forward, I think that's kind of the new normal.
So I used to work at a company that focused on satellite imagery. Okay. I'm a geospatial person by background. And as the Russians invaded Ukraine, there's this famous set of imagery that we have of this tens of miles along of their invasion force along essentially a single road. And from a logistics perspective, if I was there I'd be freaking out because that is now a turkey shoot for their adversary. We need to learn from that. I'm sure we're way ahead of that. I'm not concerned about that. But it's no longer that. That was a land-based operation where they could have, but didn't pre-position and plan and manage their supply chains. It's a completely different environment in the Indo-Pacific. We need to be ready to look at that. And again, I think data is going to play a huge factor in this. Everything from modeling sea state as terrain to analyzing mean time to failure on parts so that we can be predictive and efficient so that our warfighters get what they need when they need it at the place that they need it.
Okay. And what role do allies and partners play in building resilient supply chains across the Indo-Pacific? I know there's been a lot of talk about maybe having other countries help with, I don't know, shipbuilding, for example. What role do these allies and partners play for logistics?
Well, I mean, we don't do anything by ourselves anymore. We're completely not dependent, but we stand side by side with our allies and partners, whether it's access basing and overflight, whether it's providing, you know, vendors to get some of these bulk supplies like, you know, fuel, water, which we were talking about again, or whether it's helping with distribution, helping with security. There are lots of ways that we can be interoperable. From the technology side, we're always fighting to gain interoperability with our systems and our allies and partners so that we can truly be one cohesive unit and be better together than we are trying to be, multiple separate entities.
So I actually, again, sat in on a
Right.
panel this afternoon where they talked about this exact point and pointing out that Singapore might be able to contribute this, India something else, Australia yet a third part of the components. And then again, managing that whole ecosystem in a way that we can quickly source that material or build that part almost as a Yelp or an Amazon of that network, that logistics network across the multi-partner environment, the MPE.
All right. How is supply chain management becoming more integrated for operational planning for joint forces?
I think one of the things we're doing to try to mitigate some of the risk is we're looking at it we're viewing it as a joint problem. We're seeing how, as a joint force, we can be interoperable, whether it's a joint tactical distribution center in the Indo-Pacific, or whether it's simply, the Army and the Navy working closer together on certain parts of supply, the Army and the Marine Corps and the Navy. We're just we're trying to be more interoperable to lower some of that risk.
So GDIT is part of a larger General Dynamics corporation.
Sure.
So we have business units such as Electric Boat that build submarines. And this is a key part of our operations in that building a submarine, I learned recently, can initially take up to 10 years. It involves hundreds of providers in there. And if there's risk anywhere in that supply chain, that's a delivery risk to start with. And then it's a sustainment risk later.
Right.
What if that one company that is the key kind of linchpin in the construction goes out of business or has a fault, et cetera? So we need to analyze that from the beginning. Again, back to data-driven analytics to analyze that and bring to surface so that decision makers in the government can say and give us guidance on how to proceed.
Okay. Now, was there anything else that I didn't ask you about today with logistics in the Indo-Pacific region that you wanted to talk about, or that you feel like we should be talking about?
The overall conversation is trying to move from a legacy, we're going to move in nodes that are very sequential in nature, to an ability to sustain at the edge. The other thing that we talked about that I think is crucially important is how kind of the character of what we're doing has changed. Joe hit it several times, saying that the S4, the G4, the logistics officer has to be a more equal partner almost. Where we used to fire to maneuver or sustain to maneuver, now we have to look at maneuvering to fire, or maneuvering to sustain, to get in the right place at the right time, and then becoming just really comfortable with complexity. And that's where AI comes in, because we're building these sustainment webs. We use the term web a lot, but I really think a sustainment web says we operate more dispersed and distribution becomes the real problem. How do we synchronize and coordinate that without, cognitive overload to the few logisticians that we have? Well, is through AI, through the integration of technology, through using our joint and combined partners, and becoming very comfortable and understanding that, this is hard, but we can do it.
Sure.
I really like the term sustainment web. I think I might steal that. I think that's key as well. To add on to what Colonel Burroughs said, the idea of operating in a deny, deter, disrupt kind of environment will require us to work in pockets of local authority or local decision making and local sustainment as well. So we need to get comfortable in doing that, being uncomfortable with the complex and the challenging situation in a distributed fashion, but in a way that information feeds back, because again, that is data that will help enrich and provide after-action reports, lessons learned, and just continuous improvement.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing all of your expertise and knowledge on this subject. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As we've heard today, logistics is not just a supporting function. It's a strategic capability that can determine success or failure in a contested environment. By strengthening supply chain resilience, integrating new technologies, and deepening partnerships between government and industry, defense leaders are working to ensure forces remain equipped, ready, and mission capable even in the most challenging operational theaters. I'm Jennifer Ladd for GovExec TV. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.